Okay, so ready to dive into something kind of revolutionary.
Always.
Today, it's all about treating cocaine addiction,
Oh, wow.
but not necessarily quitting entirely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like imagine a treatment where people could cut back, even if they're not like fully ready to quit cold turkey.
That would be incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Awesome.
It's all about ketamine and helping people reduce their coke use.
Mm.
We found this amazing 2025 review article
Oh, cool.
all about it.
Yeah.
They go through tons of studies
Okay.
with animals and humans.
Interesting.
And honestly, some of the results are pretty mind-blowing.
Well, I think a lot of people are really looking for new options for treating addiction,
Oh, for sure.
especially when it comes to cocaine.
Yeah, you hear about treatments for opioid addiction all the time.
Right.
But for coke,
Not so much.
not really.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
It is.
It's actually the second most used drug globally. And there's no FDA-approved medication specifically for treating cocaine addiction yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this ketamine research is really a big deal.
Okay, so let's get down to it.
Sure.
What makes ketamine so different
Yeah.
from other drugs,
Well,
especially when it comes to treating addiction?
it has to do with how it acts in the brain.
Okay.
You know, cocaine basically hijacks the brain's reward system,
Yeah?
but ketamine seems to work in a totally different way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it doesn't cause those same problematic changes.
Mm.
And that's why researchers think it could be safer for people with cocaine use disorder.
So it's not messing with the brain in the same way as coke.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But how does that actually translate to helping someone reduce their use?
Well, researchers have been studying ketamine in both animals and humans.
Okay.
And the results are really exciting.
Like what?
Well, in one study, they gave rats ketamine,
Okay.
and they were less likely to be triggered by things that reminded them of coke.
So it's like it was helping to weaken those urges.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So it's not just about willpower.
Right.
It seems like ketamine is working on a deeper level,
Wow.
possibly rewiring those parts of the brain that get hijacked by cocaine.
Okay.
And it's not just blocking the bad stuff either.
No.
In another study with monkeys,
Okay.
ketamine actually improved brain connectivity.
Really?
In areas critical for making decisions and processing rewards.
Interesting.
And functions that get all messed up by cocaine use.
So it's helping to heal the brain.
That's what the research is suggesting.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Pretty remarkable, right?
It is.
Yeah,
Okay, so those were animal studies.
right.
What about humans?
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
AI research has actually identified ketamine as a top candidate for treating cocaine use disorder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when we look at the human studies, the results are really promising.
Give me an example.
Well, one study found that people who got ketamine had a higher rate of remission from cocaine use disorder
Oh, wow.
than those who got other medications. Yeah, and there was another study where they gave a single dose of ketamine
Yes.
to people who weren't even seeking treatment for their coke use.
Okay.
And afterwards, they were more likely to choose money.
Really?
Yeah,
Over coke?
over getting immediate access to coke.
That's wild.
It is, right.
Yeah.
It really shows how ketamine can disrupt those, like, deeply ingrained reward-seeking patterns
Yeah.
that drive addiction.
Okay, so that's some pretty compelling evidence.
It is.
But I gotta ask you,
Yeah,
ketamine has a reputation as a party drug.
right.
So isn't there a concern that people could abuse this treatment?
Of course, that's a valid concern. And
Yeah.
it's something researchers are very aware of.
Okay.
But the key difference is the context.
Okay.
When ketamine is used in a clinical setting, the risk of misuse is minimized.
Okay, so it's like any other medication that has the potential for misuse.
Exactly.
Right.
Think of it this way. Lots of medications have the potential for abuse
Yeah.
if they're not used responsibly.
Right.
But in a medical setting with proper oversight, those risks can be managed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the way ketamine is used therapeutically is totally different from its recreational use.
Right, and we've actually seen this play out with Spravato,
Oh, yeah.
which is basically the nasal spray version of ketamine
Uh-huh.
that's FDA approved for treating severe depression.
It's a great example
Yeah.
because it shows that ketamine can be used safely and effectively
Okay,
in a medical context.
so it's not a magic billet,
Right.
but it sounds like it could be a real game changer.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
It offers a new path to recovery,
Yeah.
which is something we desperately need.
Okay, so we've covered a lot,
Yeah.
but I'm really curious to know how ketamine actually works its magic in the brain.
Yeah.
Like what's going on at that cellular level
Right.
that leads to these amazing results.
Okay. Well, researchers are still trying to figure out all the details,
Yeah.
but we're getting a clearer picture of what might be going on.
Okay.
And one of the key things they're looking at is how ketamine affects the reward system in the brain,
Okay.
specifically the neurotransmitter dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yeah, the pleasure chemical.
Yeah.
So how does ketamine fit into that whole dopamine picture? Well,
Yeah. How does it?
it's pretty interesting, actually.
Okay.
You see, cocaine floods the brain with dopamine,
Yeah.
creating that intense high.
Right.
But then it all comes crashing down,
yeah.
leading to those terrible cravings.
Ah,
And what's fascinating is that ketamine seems to rebalance that dopamine system, potentially easing those withdrawal symptoms and reducing cravings.
so it's not causing those wild swings in dopamine.
Right.
It's more like chill out a bit.
Exactly.
It finds a balance.
Yeah, it's like ketamine is helping the brain find a more stable,
Right.
a less chaotic way
Okay.
to experience pleasure.
I like that. But there's got to be more to the story than just that.
Oh, there's definitely more.
Yeah.
Addiction isn't just about physical cravings.
Right. Like a whole emotional component, too.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's another area where ketamine seems to be doing something really unique.
Okay. What is it?
So researchers have been studying how ketamine affects this part of the brain called the lateral habenula.
The what?
Lateral habenula.
Okay.
Basically, it's like the brain's negative vibe center.
The negative vibe center.
Yeah, it's involved in processing disappointment,
Okay.
frustration, those kinds of things.
So how does cocaine affect this negative vibe center?
Well, cocaine can actually make the lateral habenula go into overdrive,
Huh?
contributing to feelings of depression.
Really?
And making recovery so much harder.
Oh, wow.
Like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Cocaine use makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
And those bad feelings make you want to use more cocaine.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's rough.
So where does ketamine come in?
Well, what's exciting is that ketamine seems to be able to calm down this overactivity in the lateral habenula.
Really?
Yeah, it's like turning down the volume on those negative feelings, which can then create a more positive emotional state
Yeah.
that supports recovery.
So it's not just addressing the physical cravings.
Right.
It's also helping people feel better emotionally.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a huge deal.
It is.
Okay, so there's the dopamine thing and then the negative vibe center thing.
Right.
Anything else?
There's even more.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, so ketamine also seems to be affecting something called BDNF.
What's BDNF?
Basically, think of it as fertilizer for brain cells. It
Okay.
helps those brain cells grow
Right.
and thrive.
So it's important.
It's super important.
Okay.
And you know what?
What?
Cocaine messes with BDNF levels,
Oh, no.
which contributes to both cravings and depression.
So it's like cocaine is starving the brain
You could say that.
of the stuff.
Mm.
It needs to be healthy.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does ketamine help with that?
So ketamine actually seems to boost those BDNF levels.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And that could potentially stabilize mood
Yeah.
and support lasting recovery.
Okay, so ketamine is like a triple threat.
I like that.
It's rebalancing the reward system,
Yeah.
calming down those negative emotions,
Yeah.
and promoting brain health.
It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
But I do have a question.
Okay, what is it?
We've talked about all these benefits.
Yeah.
But are they the same for everyone?
Mhm.
Like, are there differences in how men and women might respond to ketamine?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's something that researchers are still looking into.
Okay.
There's some evidence from animal studies
Okay.
that there might be some differences between the sexes in how ketamine is processed
Okay.
in the brain.
So, like, men and women might process ketamine differently.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that those studies were done in rats. And we haven't seen clear evidence of these sex differences in human studies.
Gosh.
So more research is definitely needed
Yeah, for sure.
to understand how these potential differences might actually impact how well ketamine works for treating cocaine use disorder.
So basically, the jury's still out on that one.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. But overall, it sounds like ketamine is showing a lot of promise
It really is.
for helping people reduce their cocaine use.
Absolutely. It's not a cure-all,
Right.
but it's a really powerful new tool
Yeah.
that could really change how we think about addiction treatment.
Speaking of treatment,
Yeah.
we've been talking a lot about ketamine,
Uh-huh.
but what about other medications that are sometimes used for cocaine use disorder.
Right.
Like, how does ketamine stack up against those alternatives?
So there are a few other medications that doctors sometimes use
Okay.
for cocaine use disorder,
Yeah.
but they're used off-label.
What does that mean?
It means they're not specifically FDA approved
Oh, okay.
for that purpose.
Gotcha.
And some of those medications include topiramate disulfiram and long-acting amphetamines.
Okay, and have any of those shown any promise?
They have to varying degrees.
Okay, tell me more.
They have to varying degrees.
Okay, tell me more.
So topiramate,
Yeah.
which is actually an anti-seizure medication,
Okay.
it can also reduce dopamine release in the brain,
Interesting.
which might help reduce those cravings.
So it's kind of targeting that reward system we talked about.
Exactly.
Okay.
And some studies have found that topiramate is actually more effective
Oh, wow.
than a placebo
Oh.
in reducing coke use
Yeah.
and making it less rewarding.
Okay, what about disulfiram?
Disulfiram.
I thought that was for alcohol addiction.
Traditionally, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been explored for cocaine use disorder as well.
Really?
Yeah, it basically works by making you feel really sick if you use coke.
So it's like a deterrent?
Exactly.
Okay.
And while it has shown some success in helping people stay abstinent from coke, it doesn't seem to, like, significantly reduce the amount or frequency of coke use overall.
So it might not be the best option for everyone.
Right.
What about those long-acting amphetamines?
Those are interesting
Yeah.
because they actually work by increasing dopamine levels in the brain.
Which sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, I know, right?
Since Coke does the same thing.
It does.
So it's like fighting fire with fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea is that by providing this steady, controlled release of dopamine,
Okay.
these medications can actually reduce cravings and make Coke less appealing.
So it's like replacing that chaotic dopamine rush from Coke with something more like balanced.
Exactly.
Okay.
And some studies have shown that this approach can be effective in reducing Coke use.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
There is.
Where is it?
Well, a lot of the studies have found that people tend to drop out of treatment with those long-acting amphetamines.
Why is that?
Well, because they're stimulants themselves. Oh, right.
They carry a risk of misuse
Yeah.
and dependence.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's possible for people to end up trading one addiction for another.
Right. It's a really tricky balance.
It is, and that's one of the things that makes ketamine so intriguing.
Yeah, okay, how so?
It seems to have some real advantages over these other medications.
Like what?
Well, first of all, it acts really quickly.
Oh, okay.
Which is huge when you're dealing with those intense cravings and withdrawal symptoms.
Right, so it's offering relief right when people need it most.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Second, ketamine has this potential to address both mood and addiction at the same time.
Oh.
Remember we talked about that link between coke use and depression?
Yeah.
So ketamine's antidepressant effects could really help people manage those co-occurring conditions.
Yeah, it's huge.
Right.
It's a more holistic approach to treatment.
It is.
I like that.
Yeah, and finally, ketamine works through a different mechanism than these other medications.
Yeah, which means it could be effective for people who haven't responded to other treatments.
So it's like offering a whole new pathway to recovery.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. But with all this talk about ketamine, I'm curious about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like, we've been focusing on abstinence versus reduction.
Right.
But what does that actually mean for someone who's struggling with cocaine use?
That's a really great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets at the heart of how we think about addiction treatment.
Okay.
You know, for a long time, the goal was always complete abstinence.
Yeah.
Like you either quit or you failed.
Right. Very black and white.
Very black and white. But there's been a real shift in thinking lately.
Okay.
Recognizing that reducing coke use, even without achieving abstinence, is a huge win.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging that every step towards reducing harm is a step in the right direction.
So it's progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the research is really clear on this.
Okay.
Studies show that even small reductions in cocaine use
can have these ripple effects, leading to improvements in mental health, employment, and quality of life.
So even if you're not ready to quit entirely, cutting back can still make a huge difference.
It can. And ketamine could be a real game changer
in
helping people achieve those reductions.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive
It is.
into ketamine and its potential for treating cocaine use disorder.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride.
It has been. We've learned so much.
We have. But honestly, we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, for sure.
There's so much more to learn about this fascinating field.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay, I like it.
So we've been talking a lot about ketamine's potential for addiction.
Right.
But what if its ability to rewire the brain could be applied to other challenges as well?
Like, what do you have in mind?
Well, we talked about how ketamine might actually help repair some of the damage done by coke,
Haha.
like promoting brain growth,
Yeah.
improving connectivity, all that.
Right.
What if those same mechanisms could actually be used to help people recover from other types of trauma?
Trauma, that's really interesting. I mean, we know that trauma can leave these lasting scars on the brain,
Right.
impacting everything from emotions to behavior.
And if ketamine can help the brain heal and form new connections, could it also play a role in healing those trauma-related scars?
It's definitely an avenue worth exploring.
For sure.
And it really speaks to the broader potential of ketamine research.
Yeah.
You know, we're just beginning to understand how powerful this medication could be.
Right.
And who knows what other possibilities might be unlocked as we delve deeper.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about.
It really is.
It is. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of ketamine and its potential for changing how we approach cocaine use disorder.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
I always love a good deep dive.
Me too. And to our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to do your own exploring.
Yeah, keep learning.
We'll be sure to include some helpful resources in the show notes.
Awesome.
This is a rapidly evolving field, so stay curious, stay informed,
Definitely.
and keep those questions coming.
And until next time, keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.
Yes, there's always something fascinating to discover.